Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Hager number 730S-MIL-S. This is a mill finish aluminum automatic door bottom mortised mount with a silicone insert. Okay, this is an automatic door bottom, and in this video I'm going to mention that automatic door bottoms are a very elegant way by which to go about sealing the bottom of the door. And we will start with reviewing this item from Hager. So an automatic door bottom, before we get into dissecting the part number, an automatic door bottom is something that, by virtue of its title, automatically seals the bottom of the door when the door is closed. Every time you close the door, you've got a seal. The way that's accomplished is because of the mechanism. Whenever the door is opened, its seal snaps back up into the housing, giving you, an ability to seal over an area that may otherwise have some sort of a contributing obstacle. And what I mean by that is, imagine maybe the front door of your house, and you have your door, and then what's on the front door of your house, whether it be the front door, back door, or your garage door, side door, basement door. It's probably a rug to wipe your feet, somewhere to take your shoes off and put them there. The door, if it had a traditional door sweep on it, is probably going to hit that rug and not be able to swing without forcing the door open and damaging the door bottom. An automatic door bottom mitigates that problem by removing the seal altogether. That makes it an elegant sort of solution for the problem. And the way that it does that is the construction of the device literally permits the bottom to spring back up into place, which we'll go over that in a moment. You're going to see automatic door bottoms used in residential applications, more so in commercial applications, but equally valid in either or any application. They come in, there's really only one overall type of an automatic door bottom, even though their applications will differ, meaning they will have some where the drop is shorter than standard, maybe a ½ inch, atypical, maybe 3/4 or 7/8. There are those that are longer. Generally about 3/4 is what you're going to find maximum drop from the bottom of the door, or I should say the bottom of the installed automatic door bottom, to the top of the sill structure that you want to seal against. If they're acoustically rated, they're generally less. If they're standard, they're about 3/4. There are some out there that are 1 inch, so if you have an excessive gap, you'd want to focus on those manufacturers who have 1 inch maximum drop models available. There are those for swinging doors, which is the common unit. Those models are generally always installed on the push side of the door. So if your door swings into the space, it will be mounted on the exterior side. There are those models that are different for sliding doors because the way that the drop bar must work or behave is inherently different when it comes to a sliding door application. You can literally have a pocket door in your house and have an automatic door bottom that will make contact and drop when their pocket door closes. There are those models that have a variation on how they're triggered, meaning what forces them to drop. There are those models that can, with an accessory piece of hardware, be installed on the pull side of the opening. Many of them are handed, many of them are not handed. There are different colors available. There are different inserts available: silicone, neoprene, synthetic rubbers, brush type inserts that are available as well. There are then those that mount mortised, like the 730. There are those that are surface mounted. That would be the second type of mount, mortised surface mounted. You can then order a variation of the surface mount and semi-mortise it, meaning you will mortise the door flush to the face so that the body, while you can see it, is flush with the face of the door. And all of those installation mounting types change how you end up talking about and handling an automatic door. They change how you order them, what part numbers to use, obviously, their applications change, etc. For instance, you might need to think about mortised door bottoms because technically it's not permissible to have an automatic door bottom surface mounted hanging into the opening when it's a handicap compliant sort of opening. There are no projections that are permitted within a certain space height of a doorway when it's handicap compliant. Think of a hotel with an ADA compliant room. Okay. Now, let's focus down on just the 730. The 730 is a mortised style. That means you're going to route. You're going to route or prep or mortise a channel into the bottom of the door. Literally a channel into the bottom of the door so that your door is going to look like that when it's all said and done. You're going to prep that mortise open completely so that you can fit into that area your automatic door bottom. Okay? That's nice because they're concealed. You never see them. Well, you'll only see them when you open the door and look at the end of the door, or if the door is closed and you press your head on the floor, but otherwise you won't see them, so they're nice and concealed. The one concept on a mortised style is that your line of defense is now under the center of the door. Would not be, forgive me, would not be my ideal placement if it was an exterior door, because I would want my line of defense as close to the outside as possible on that door. If I was going to do wood doors and exterior, which doesn't go together, but if I were to do that, I would probably add a drip cap on the outside to help deflect water away. But you're going to see mortised styles, this one specifically, in wood door applications, in interior applications. Now, this is a UL listed, smoke tested, positive pressure compliant unit, which means this is a listed item that can be installed on a fire rated door opening. It's completely permissible to do that. What's not permissible to do that is prep this in the field on your door. You have to order those doors from the factory, giving them your machining requirements, of which this would be among listed on there, for the factory to not only reinforce with the proper internal construction, because it does change from a standard fire rated door, and then they will do that mortising prep in the bottom, most likely with a CNC router. So if it's a fire-rated door, that door will come prepped from the factory. If it's not a fire-rated door, it's really no big deal to mortise for these. I've done it countless times. And the tool that I use, and there is a company, Northfield, if you were to search that in our site, you should be able to come up with a couple of items of theirs that we have available. I'm looking on a screen here to make sure I'm giving you the proper information. Northfield, Northfield. That does not come up. Let's take a closer look. I was saying it wrong. My memory can't be trusted. It's Northfield, Norfield. If you were to search that in our site, that is a company that makes some specialized tools. And you can click on the product catalog that's there, and you'll find a fixture that will permit you to mortise the bottom of these doors. In essence, what it is a large aluminum L angle that you bolt to the bottom of your plunge router. It doesn't have to be a plunge router, and I think with these people it's not a plunge router. Although maybe it is, I forget. And you lay that door flat on sawhorses, and you lay that whole, you got a router. Now imagine your base is down here, but now there's a big angle on the bottom of it. Lay that down on the door with the angle flat on the face of the door, and you're going to want to make sure that you either mask off the face of the door and that you, believe it or not, take that aluminum angle and sand it down, because any burrs that are on there are going to scratch the face of your door. You'll take that contraption, you'll push your router bit in, and you'll make that pass. The reason that it's nice to have the tool is because it gives you the center line of the route, the mortise bit, based on where the angle is installed onto the bottom of the base of the router, right in the proper thickness for an 1 3/4 door. And I don't recall the diameter of the bit that's on there, but obviously you can change that. You can also change the center line, so if you're doing 1 3/8 doors, you can do, which is very unusual but not unheard of, you can change that center line. So mortising the bottom of the door, however you do it, buying a fixture that someone's already engineered and made, or you're doing it yourself, it comes back the same way. That's how you install this on your non-fire rated door. There's an image down below this video that shows the cross section requirement of that. What they're giving us, though, is the dimensional properties of the item itself. The mortise required is on the installation instructions, which is linked to below this video. Before we go to that, let's go over the rest of the extended description information. Aluminum door bottom, mortise style with a silicone insert. This is silicone, a very good option when it comes to durability, when it comes to sound attenuation, when it comes to extreme temperatures. Okay. Mortise style are usually, I think exclusively, only made in a mill aluminum finish. The reason is you never see them. Not exactly true, though, because they do include end caps, which we'll go over in a moment, that are not finished. I've had people need to buy a certain automatic door bottom, and it's mortised, and they don't make them in dark bronze. Hager does not make this in dark bronze. So you're going to have to figure out some sort of treatment to cover up the color as you'll see it on the edge of the door, or you'll just leave it. Provides an outstanding seal against drafts, light, smoke, and sound. For best results, use in conjunction with a threshold. Absolutely. You want to be sure that you have something that you are sealing against when it drops down. A threshold would be excellent for that. Not just because Hager is a threshold manufacturer, but because it is, something that you want to have two pieces mated to each other. When the door fully closes, the gasket extends downward to provide a seal. The gasket retracts when the door is open. Furnished exact length as stated. When you order a 36, it's going to ship out at a 36. We're going to cover that too. May be trimmed in the field up to 2-inch. As a general rule, I usually tell customers when it's smaller than a 36-inch door, not when it's 2'10" and smaller, you should order the exact size that you need. And not cut anything, because I have generally found that there are some manufacturers that can't or that will tell you that you're not permitted to cut them down when it's below a certain size. If it's smaller than 3 foot, order at the right size, or if it's any size, order at the right size. The point being, Hager's making these from components, so they don't care if they're cutting it to 36, which is really unusual, or 35 3/4, which is probably the correct size that this will have to get trimmed to. Okay. Furnished with end cover and strike plates. So you've got 2 end caps. One is for the hinge side, one is for the lock side. We'll go over that. You then also have a strike plate. And again, positive pressure, smoke, and UL tested. We are going to now move to the installation instructions so we can get a closer overall view of what this item is and what it does. Now let's dive into the installation instructions a little bit. And we'll tackle the rest of the documents there as well. So the installation instructions are going to be for some different models. And we're focusing on the 730 mortise applied automatic door bottom. The mortise applied door bottoms are non-handed and can be used for left or right hand installations. For ease of installation, the door should be removed from the hinges. Yeah, there's no way to install this without removing it from the hinges. You have to get it laid up and flat. So the mortise that is there, they're giving us, is 1 3/4 deep. Okay, and the mortise width is listed in step 3 of the installation procedure, which is 11/16. Let's put a couple of tape measure dimensions on this real quick. So they want 1 3/4 for the depth of the body. I'd say that that would be reasonably no problem. Yeah, I'd say that it would be spot on. I might be tempted to go a 1/16 of an inch deeper. Then they want 11/16 wide, and the width of the channel itself, as you can see, it's about 5/8. So 11/16 is going to be perfect. You don't want that too large because you've got the screw holes here, and you don't have much margin between the edge of the sidewall of the housing and where that hole is. Okay, you don't have a lot of margin there. So that's going to be your mortise. Do you have to center it in the thickness of the door? I guess you don't, except that the width of the overall width of the item is 1 1/4. So you're going to scooch it out to one side. You're going to leave an awfully thin amount of veneer there. So yes, this would normally be mortised in the center. If you had a 2 1/4 inch thick door, I suppose you could bias it to one side a little bit. So installation procedure step 1, if necessary, cut unit to match width of door. Do not cut from the end with the adjustment screw, and the maximum cut is 2 inch. This 36-inch piece is probably for sure going to need to be cut down because unless the client's door is 36-inch, which it could be, wood residential doors are often the full size, and then the inside of the frame is actually larger. So you can have a 36-inch wide door with 1/8 of an inch at either end and have a 36 1/4 inch ID on your frame. Again, you do see that in residential construction, but in commercial construction, you never see that. So you'll be able to cut that down. They're saying do not cut it from the end with the adjustment screw. You'll notice on this end, there's this bolt hanging out here. That's what they call the adjustment screw. You'll notice on the other end, there's no such item. This side is always the strike side. This side is always the hinge side. Okay, you'll always install this side on the hinge side. Never cut from this side. If the unit is trimmed in the field, undercut the inner drop-down gasket bar from the end opposite the adjustment screw. Saying that twice now. The gasket bar should be 1/8 of an inch less than the external housing. Here's what that means. This is the gasket bar that's in here. This thing that I'm wiggling in my finger that has the silicone inserted into it, that's the gasket bar or the drop bar. You'll notice that that's not quite flush. And they're saying it should be 1/8 of an inch less than the external housing, as it is now. Here's why. When I activate the button and push the unit down, which is how these work, by the way, when the door closes, this comes in contact with the jamb via hitting the head of the strike plate, because if it's a wood frame, you don't want that bolt making contact with your wood. It will create a divot over time. It'll hit that strike plate. That, when you push the door closed, that has nowhere to go but in. When you push that in, it's going to compress a flat spring that's inside of there. That's going to force the bottom to drop just like that. When you push that in, what happens is the drop bar, and this version of door bottom from Hager is pretty stiff on its spring. What happens is that I'm holding it out. That actually, I didn't get it held out long enough. That actually, well, I'll describe it. It actually moves this way. So it's got to be 1/8 of an inch recessed so that when the drop bar drops, it's now then flush, because it does scooch out 1/8 of an inch. So you'll have to cut it, but you're going to have to make that drop bar still 1/8 of an inch behind there. Otherwise, you will run the risk of it hitting the jamb. Well, if you've got an excessive gap, like 3/16, it's probably not going to hit the jamb. But you do want it to be sucked in, because that's how these operate. What happens is the unit, as you noticed, drops on the hinge side. Okay? But what it's actually doing is moving this way ever so slightly. What happens in reality, when you push that, and that makes contact with the sill, what happens to the other end? The other end toggles down. So what happens is, door is closed, bottom drops. As it hits the sill, it can't go any further, forcing it this way. What that means is if you have an irregular floor surface, it may or may not work to your benefit. Your floor needs to be reasonably level for this to work. If your floor goes lower, greater gap on the hinge side up to the strike side, that bottom's got to drop a lot before it makes contact, but by then, there's not a whole lot that can happen there. And conversely, if it's tall, if the smaller gap, it'll hit right away, which is okay, but you need to continue to have it drop down to accommodate for that. So it'll work reasonably well within those instances, as long as that amount of level is really tiny. And the reason for that is, and they'll say it again later, in bold actually in step 7, you want the bottom to stop dropping as soon as it makes contact. Because if you extend and the drop of the bar is directly related to how far out you turn that bolt. If I turn it in quite a bit, the projection is reduced. It's not going to move very far. It won't drop very much, okay? But when I draw that out counterclockwise with the slotted hole that's here, it will drop a greater distance. You want, as soon as it makes contact, for it to stop pushing down, because the bolt will continue to get pushed in, continue to belly that flat spring, so that the negative side of that is when the door opens, you're opening the door, the flat spring is relaxing, but you've still not lifted the drop bar off the floor, and that drop bar is going to clank around inside of there and get dragged across the floor, wearing down your seal and possibly destroying the automatic door bottom. I've had people call me and say, hey, the thing fell apart. Okay, tell me what you did. Well, I turned the bolt all the way out and I ran it the first time. And I says, well, that's the problem. You're going to put it in all the way clockwise, bring it in so it's not making any contact, then slowly go out a turn or two at a time and test the operation. And the unit was destroyed and irreparable at that point. Okay, now, step 3 gives us the size of the mortise. Step 4, position the unit into the mortise, the end having the adjustment screw flush with the edge of the door, mark and drill pilot holes and install mounting screws. So you're going to literally install this item. So what they're saying is the hinge side, you're going to want this flush. It can be recessed in ever so slightly, if you want, but be mindful that your end cap, and we showed you 2 earlier, it's going to cover it up ultimately so that it looks like that. That's ultimately what you're going to see. Okay, you'll end up trimming that. Mark and drill pilot holes to install the screws. That's all this stuff down here, and all those screws are included as well. These round head or pan head screws. That's for the bottom of the door. Step 5, once the door is off, you've mortised it, you've applied the unit to you've cut it to length, you've applied it to the bottom of the door. Turn that bolt all the way in so it only sticks out 1/8 of an inch. Rehang the door. Okay. At that moment, before going to step 7, test the door. Does it drop at all? Okay, if not, which it probably won't, turn the adjustment screw clockwise so that the gasket bar drops to provide a complete seal when the door is closed. To reduce the amount of drop, turn screw clockwise. Yes, that makes sense. When you turn it clockwise, it'll draw it in. When you counterclockwise, it will increase the amount of the drop. Do not extend the adjustment screw more than what is required for the gasket to just come in contact with the floor or threshold. This can result in excessive wear, which it will, and possible damage, which is very likely as well. Now, it's generally preferable to have someone adjusting the door with you, meaning one person can watch how it drops as the other closes the door, but you can do it yourself. Close the door and then get down and look. You want to be sure that you've got a seal on the hinge side, which you will, but you want to stop adjusting counterclockwise once you have a seal all the way on the lock side, just so the silicone will come down and make contact. And then at that point, you're done. Pushing down harder is not going to give you a better seal, and in fact, it will work in the opposite. The fact that this will automatically seal very nicely across the entire floor makes this an elegant sort of scenario. Maximum drop is 3/4 inch. So you do need to work within the constraints of from the bottom of the unit to what you're going to make contact with cannot be more than 3/4 inch unless you're going to raise your sill, or maybe you're going to install the unit so it's shimmed down a bit, but that's very atypical to do that. in step 7 still, when the screw is properly adjusted, position the end cap with the hex hole over the adjustment screw and attach to the door to lock in the setting. That will not permit it to rotate. Then we've got 5 screws. We're going to need 2 for here, even though those holes aren't countersunk. Probably going to countersink that a little bit. This is just sheet metal aluminum. 2 will go here. Your lock side, that's what it really should look like. Your strike side will have this, which you'll cover off. That 5th screw is going to be for your strike plate. Okay, you're going to again place that onto the jamb where the adjusting bolt's going to make contact with. Step 8, attach the remaining end cap to the opposite end. For wood frames, install the small protective strike plate where the adjustment screw contacts the frame. The rest of the installation instructions that are there talk about other models, but it is interesting to be able to discuss them or to at least review them. They do talk about the surface mount model that's there as well, along with installing a hollow metal mortised type, which are intended to go into the inverted bottom channel of a steel door, is how those work. So that covers the installation aspect. Moving back to the extended description, let's click on the link called Product Catalog, and that will show you the 730. It will tell you that it's also available in an N for neoprene insert. Whether you use neoprene or silicone, I find silicone is a bit more flexible. I find silicone, and I don't know if this is utterly accurate, but I understand that silicone has a better, wider range of temperature that it can work within than neoprene. I might be looking, I don't know about abrasion resistance. I might be tempted to say neoprene might be more abrasion resistant. If I had extreme temperatures in either way, I'm probably going to stick with silicone. Neoprene, if it's a closed cell neoprene, I would use if I expect there to be water making contact with it, because a closed cell neoprene will be better at insulating that. This also appears to be a closed cell type silicone, so there won't be hollow pockets inside of there. I would say that either would be appropriate. I would probably want silicone if I needed to have a bit more elasticity in the item, be able to compress it a bit more. You will see the 742, same sort of style, but for the hollow metal version. The 743 is there as well. That's just simply going to be a larger model to give you more surface area with that much bigger piece of neoprene only that's there. The surface mount standard size, the 740, the surface mount larger size, 747. And you can install either of those surface mount as a recessed model or a semi-mortise where it's flush. The problem with that is the end caps that you're going to get will be different for those, and in fact there generally is not an end cap made for that. You can see from the installation instructions how an L angle end cap works when they're surface mounted, but if you were to mortise that flush to the face of the door, that L cap's really not going to work. If you're going to install that and forego any end caps, you might want to crimp your drop bar a little bit so that your insert doesn't slide out, because it can move and will move over time. Let's talk about the size that you're going to order this. The net size that you order the unit is going to be based on not only the net width of the door, but also how you're going to install it. If you're going to install a mortise or a semi-recess mount, a semi-mortise mount where it's flush, you're going to order it pretty much the size of the door. If you have a beveled door, you're going to want to take that into account. This won't be beveled on the end, so if you're going to try to split the difference, you might make it a 1/16 of an inch or even an 1/8 of an inch less if it's a mortise mount, because you can let that silicone run long. You're going to have your drip cap that's there. Pardon me. You're going to have your end plate that's going to cover that up, because your door will be different on one side when you measure the width as compared to the other side if it's beveled. Same if it's a semi-recess mount. Now, if it's a surface mount, the door size doesn't matter at all, because the only thing that matters in that regard is when the door's closed and you're standing in an unlocked push side application, you measure the distance between the stops is what you do. you deduct 1/8 of an inch from that dimension, and that's the size that you order it. If you had a 3-foot hollow metal door, and it was nominally 36 inch and actually 35 3/4, if it was a hollow metal frame with 5/8 projection stops, that 35 3/4 door width doesn't matter. 36 minus 5/8 minus 5/8, that's going to give you 34 3/4. Less than 1/8 of an inch, 34 5/8 would be the net order size. So the door width does not matter in that sort of scenario. So be mindful of how you're measuring and then ordering the material. I do recommend that you order them pre-cut. Why take the chance of damaging the unit when you cut it? There's also a link to a document called Product Info, which is a summary of general information as it pertains to weather stripping. FYI sort of data only. There's then also a document called Template, which is just a summary of the dimensional properties of the item, which are basically in the extended description alone. So what makes them elegant as well is that, back to the first part of the video when we were talking about having a rug and it's snapping up and you're not hitting the rug. Well, in practice, an automatic door bottom works really great when you have an attached garage. You pull into the garage, get out of the car, walk inside. There's a rug in there, but what do your kids do? Well, they leave the shoes behind the door. A regular door sweep or a triple fin that's been stapled to the bottom of that wood door is going to get torn up over those shoes. You're going to get frustrated. You're just going to push the door open all the way, damaging the unit, and it will fatigue over time. I can only get maybe 5 years of service out of an item like that before it's gone, it's destroyed, because it's making contact with stuff. Automatic door bottom snaps back up, glides right over the shoe that's been left there, or at least is it tearing the material off and apart. That makes it elegant. And if there's one thing that I would mention that would make them not elegant, and that would be this. If I've sold 1,000 of these, if I've sold 10,000 of these, I've heard this one time. Every time you open the door, there's going to be audible proof that that has clanked back up into the housing. So be mindful of that. You will hear it retract. There are models on the market that work to defeat that to a certain extent. You will notice in the product catalog, none of these models give you a neoprene barrier between the drop bar snapping back up and its greater housing. There are models on the market that will muffle that. None of them are silent, but they will muffle it. But I do mention it because I did hear that complaint once where a client said that's unacceptable. And since then, and that was well over 20 years ago, I've brought it to people's attention to say, I'm aware of it, so I make you aware of it. That's the bottom line. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Hager products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. The name Hager is synonymous with hinges. Hager Hinge, that's their namesake. But they get into far more than just hinges. Obviously, Roton or continuous aluminum and pin and barrel hinges, door closers, exit devices, lock sets, weather stripping, trim and auxiliary hardware, accessory hardware, sliding door hardware, electrified hardware, on and on and on. There is everything available from Hager except the door and frame itself is the bottom line. And I expect that they're working on that as well. They have a very unique keying system where they can supply you with a keying system that will work in both interchangeable and conventional core applications, which is unique to them as far as I know. And generally I find that their inventory is very deep on commodity items, and that they do, of course, manufacture much of what they sell. And I finally find that there are people, their clients, end users of Hager, that are incredibly loyal to Hager at the end of the day. Any questions on the 730S in a MIL finish or in a silicone insert or any other Hager product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.